On today's Locked On Jayhawks, what does KU still have to play for? What can they still accomplish in 2024?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. I am Derek Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. And thank you to everybody catching the show wherever you get it, whether it's anywhere you get your podcast or on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're talking what does KU football still have to play for this season? Because it can feel like at 1-3, it's dead. You know, what's going to happen for you? But there still is a good amount that KU could accomplish. Now, obviously, you could say, well, they could just win their final 8 games and they'd be 9-3 and they'd be in the Big 12 championship game. They'd be 8-1 in conference play. Of course, that is something they could play for and should strive for. Realistically, from the outside, like that's something the players, the coaches, they should strive for that. Realistically, from the outside, what are some realistic things that they could still accomplish this season? I still think there's a good amount. So we'll get into that. And then a little KU roundup as KU women's basketball has a new commit. KU women's volleyball now ranked 7th in the country. KU women's soccer getting a big win at Cincinnati. We'll discuss all that on this episode of the show, which is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Okay, so what are some of the things that Kansas can still accomplish that they still have to play for this season? Like I said, the unrealistic way of looking at this is saying, well, schedule is still, K-State's what? The one ranked team that you still play is Iowa State ranked right now. Iowa State looks pretty good for what it's worth. But like if Iowa State and K-State are the 2 ranked teams you have to play left and they're fringe top 25 teams and you get one of them at home, if you figure your stuff out, why not, right? But again, that's not realistic. So maybe you win a couple of these games and we can reevaluate that thing. But making a bowl game would be the big one. Obviously, coming into this season, the goals were well above make another bowl game, let alone make a bowl game that would be a worse bowl game than the one that you were just in. I'll tell you right now, sign me up for another Liberty Bowl. I don't care. No, I wasn't there for the one when all the water was gone in the city, so I can see if you're upset about that. But nonetheless, KU has never made a bowl game in 3 consecutive seasons. Think about that for a second. As much as, like, I almost view it this way. If Kansas was having this season in year 2, now unfortunately this isn't what happens, and it is what's happening, and that's part of it. But like if Kansas was having this season in year 2, so year 1 was your 2-10 season, you got blown out in most of your games, had some close games at the end. Year 2, you're now being like, oh, we're so close to winning, we're getting so close. And then year 3 was what year 2 was, which was making it to a bowl game, going 6-6. And year 4 was what year 3 was, going 9-4. The progress would feel so much better than where it is right now, but it's because you got your hopes up and you had all these players back and yada, 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 this and that. But still, from a big picture standpoint, if you go to a 3rd straight bowl game and do that by the time you're through 4 years of the Lance Leipold era, when you've never done that before, I mean, it's unbelievable how much better the program, the place the program would be in than it was before they took over. Again, maybe not as far along as you might have hoped after this year, but like that would still be a huge accomplishment, something this program could not take for granted. It's going to take some scooting to get to that point, though. Even to get to 6-6, KU's going to have to go 5-3 from here, right? So it's going to take some good play the rest of the way, but that would still be a pretty big accomplishment for KU if they can do it. And I think that is one beauty of college football, just in general, is that the idea, if you're in the NFL, and yes, there are teams who maybe start 0-2. Like the Ravens started 0-2. They're probably going to make the playoffs. They'll still be a Super Bowl contender, right? Same with the Bengals. But you look at like teams who might, if you start, I don't know, 3-5 in the NFL, it's like, what do we have to play for? Like, we're not going to win. College, it's like we could rally, we could get 6-6, we can make a bowl game. And so I do think that is something cool about the sport. And so, yes, that would be a big deal for KU. I think the other big one that you can still accomplish to play for, just in general, like going out on a positive note for Devin Neal and the seniors. This is a giant group of seniors. You have like 30 seniors in this class. Don't you want to go out in a positive manner, right? And I mean, again, if you compare, if you go 6-6 at the end of the year and you compare that to your expectations before the season, it wouldn't feel positive. But from where we are now, it would feel like a big positive from where you were getting there. And again, you could look back on a big picture and say, wow, that senior class made 3 straight bowl games and helped them get them out of the dumps. And I think it's the least that everybody can do for them, or I guess it would be fitting for them to be able to go to another bowl game because of what they have helped this program accomplish. And that even if they do this season, I hope this doesn't happen, but like even if they do go 3-9 or 4-8 this season, it is still vastly more competent as a program and where they are at than where they were before Lance Leipold took over. And so I want that to be celebrated. And I specifically do think of Devin Neal because of how much he has given to the program, being the local kid in Lawrence, deciding to come back this year for another year when he didn't have to. Obviously, he's going to have a chance to break some individual records, and that'll give him that opportunity to do some of that stuff. But I would like to see him be able to have some of that team accomplishment in this season as well, to be able to have some of that stuff that we look back on and think of that in an even fonder way, because I think he deserves that in everything that he has kind of sacrificed for the program. This is one that I think is very interesting, maybe based on the timeline, but also kind of based on now. So last week we had an episode talking about why you couldn't bench Jalon Daniels yet. And as part of that conversation, as part of that podcast, I mentioned the idea, and thank you if you're an everydayer, you already caught this, that at some point there would hit a breaking point, though, that if the season was lost, let's say you dropped to 3-7 or something, you're not going to make a bowl game. At that point, do you sit there the final 2 weeks and go, and I think this would behoove you in that situation, hey, I don't know that Jalon Daniels is going to be back after this year? Because it felt like, for what it's worth, like, the Jalon Daniels thing, it's going to be weird to figure out because it seemed like all the energy, all the vibes coming into the year was that this was going to be Jalon's last year at Kansas. And I think the ideal world was that he was going to go pro. Obviously, the level of play that has happened, that's not going to be an avenue for him, right? I mean, if he goes off these final 8 games, then I guess that is entirely possible. There's still a lot of season left. But like realistically right now, that is not going to be an avenue for him. So would he stick with that? Would he transfer? Would he decide to come back for another year? I mean, Jason Bean wasn't going to play football another year, and the KU staff convinced him to come back, and that turned out pretty well for Jason Bean and for Kansas. Maybe that happens with Jalon Daniels. But if you don't know the answer to that, does it behoove you to say, hey, we should probably figure out what we have here in a year 2, Cole Ballard. We should figure out what we have here in a year 1, Isaiah Marshall, because we need to know, do we need to hit the transfer portal in the offseason? We need to know what those known commodities are so we can cross-compare them to David McComb coming in as a 4-star recruit at the quarterback position. And so that becomes as much a part of this as anything. The rest of this season is an audition for who the quarterback is going to be. And heck, I'll even take this step further, is an audition for who the offensive coordinator should and can be in the 2025 season for KU too, right? I mean, if the offense doesn't turn it around, if it gets worse or it stays the same, I've talked a lot about the idea that, and it's true, that Lance Leipold is very patient with his guys. Would he let go of Jeff Grimes after 1 year? I don't know. His track record hasn't totally done that, but would there be pressure from upstairs in the athletic department? I don't know. Maybe there would be. You look at like Matt Lubick. I know Nevada's only sitting at 2-3, which doesn't sound that crazy, but for Nevada, they were 2-10 last year. They were a train wreck. And that's 2-3 with a 5-point loss to SMU, who just blasted TCU, a 3-point loss to a pretty good Georgia Southern team that I think was picked to finish 2nd or 3rd in their division in the Sun Belt, and a loss at Minnesota. Like, Nevada could end up being a bowl team. Matt Lubick's doing pretty good things with their offense there. Or do you, I don't know, go find a new guy? Do you promote Jim Zabrowski, who did well in the bowl game for whatever it is, right? It's an audition, but if Jeff Grimes can figure it out, then you feel more comfortable going into year 2 of a system with that. And it's the same thing for the quarterback situation here. Again, part of it is what's going to happen with Jalon. But if you're Jalon Daniels, like, we see this happen all over the country too. We saw it happen at Kansas State, right? We saw it happen in Oklahoma. And sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. Like, Oklahoma's probably sitting there today going, yeah, we kind of wish we had Dylan Gabriel because Jackson Arnold just got benched last game against Tennessee. But there hits a certain point where you have this young guy waiting on the bench and like, we want to see what he can bring to the table. And we don't want him to transfer away because we can get multiple years out of him. We're only going to get 1 more year out of you. And to where if Kansas doesn't like the rest of the season, do they say, hey, it's in the best interest of both parties because we're not going to give you the same amount of NIL money. You're going to make more NIL money over here. It's going to be a better opportunity for you, and it'll be a better opportunity for us so we can play Isaiah Marshall or, Cole Ballard or David McComb, whoever it is. Again, I'm not saying any of that's going to happen, but like all of these things are conversations or discussions that are on the board, that the level of play the rest of the season is kind of an open audition to figuring out what the coaching staff, what Lance Leipold thinks the best direction of the program is moving forward. So as much as they can still accomplish some of those things like making a bowl and trying to go out on top and trying to win some big games the rest of the way and still have some positive successes for the seniors, it is an audition for a lot of these individuals, including kind of that quarterback and offensive coordinator position. And I think that really applies, you could probably say, for a lot of players overall, like in general, just finding good young players that can step up. We saw that last week with Blake Harrell, like that bodes well for him, or finding players who can fit into bigger roles on next year's team. It really does apply kind of across the board there. We're going to continue on some more reasons for KU to still try for things to accomplish, for new goals for the rest of 2024 for KU football. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Roy. Roy is a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. You can download Roy for iOS or Android and enter referral code Locked On, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. This week, we've selected Devin Neal. So they're actually letting us, the Locked On hosts, like pick different players to, as part of whether it's a highlight, whether the player of the week, whatever it is, to get $100 on Roy. And we decided to send it to Devin Neal. Maybe I'll start putting this up for a poll of who we should send it to each and every week. But this is kind of like Devin Neal could have gotten player of the week for last week for KU, but it's kind of a, I don't know, a combination of everything he's done for the program, whether it's this season. I mean, he's having a good year. He's averaging over 6 yards per carry. He's got like 400 yards rushing and stuff like that. I think deserved it for that kind of player of the year situation that you're kind of talking about so far for KU. If you're talking about that on the offense side, the reason they've even stayed afloat on offense is because of the running game. So you can do that with Roy. If you were impressed with his performance or somebody else on Saturday, you can show him some love too. Just hop on Roy and throw in a few bucks. If everyone pitches in $10, it adds up fast for Devin Neal or whoever else. Now you have the chance to show your appreciation for said player and his standout performance this week, as well as what he'll continue to bring to the program. Get off the sidelines and into the game with Roy. Continuing on with Locked On Jayhawks, thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can check out Locked On College Football for your second listen of the day. Okay, what are some other areas that KU still has to play for, goals for the rest of the season? This is kind of a big one that feels a little less likely given where you are, but then again, they just did lose by a significant margin. Beat K-State. At this point in time, like if you would have said before the season, would you prefer to go 9-3 or would you prefer to go 4-8 but beat K-State? I would gladly take the 9-3, even at the scenario. Like everybody's chomping at the bit to beat K-State, but like even then, like that's a big difference. But at this point, you're already 1-3. It's kind of like, hey, if we're going down with the ship, you're going down with us, and it's going to be a tough game. KU will be an underdog in that game. It's on the road, all that sort of stuff. One way, though, that you can really salvage the season is by winning that game. Because, as I said, like if Kansas makes a bowl game, you'll be able to at least refer to this team as, hey, they were the one that made the third straight bowl game for the first time in program history. And that'll be a really cool thing. If they don't, but they at least win the K-State game, you can point back to this year and be like, they finally beat K-State. That was the team that got over the hump in that game. And that'll at least be one really fun weekend, really one fun day memory that you'll have from this season. So I don't know how likely that is, but weird stuff happens in this league all the time. And that would certainly be something that would be the headline, the banner for this year's team, so to speak, at this point in time, sitting at 1-3. This one kind of off the field, but like finishing out the recruiting class and staying on guys despite things not going so well. So I guess they're going to have a lot of recruits in attendance for the game this weekend in Arrowhead, which scares me a little bit. I mean, obviously, like what do you have to continue to recruit. And like a lot of these things were scheduled beforehand. And, if you're not going to have great attendance this game, then what makes you think you're going to have great attendance in that? Like, you can't keep pushing it down the road. Like, you have to have the recruits visit at some point or another. But it just makes me hope even more that there is at least decent attendance for this game so that they can have, I mean, it really is all cyclical with this stuff and how impactful it is, not just for this year, but kind of the future year. But right now, Kansas is sitting with 15 commits. I wouldn't say they have like that star of the recruiting class. Like, don't get me wrong, they have good players in this recruiting class, but like last year, I viewed the stars of the class, Dak Brinkley and DJ Warner, right? Overall, it's solid right now. Can they add that star of the class, or can somebody develop into it? Like, does somebody just kind of break out this season? I don't remember what Warner was. Warner might have still been like 4-star, but then he broke out into being like a near 5-star, honestly, the way that he kind of finished out the season. I don't know. Maybe somebody will do that for KU here, but can you add a few more in addition to that? Can you retain the guys that you already have committed, right? Like, that's going to be a part of this. If your record isn't as good, if it's not as positive as you wanted, can you stay positive in the recruiting game that keeps guys around? That'll be kind of the big question there. And then the last one I have here is just gain some positive momentum back. It feels like the pendulum is swinging the wrong way. And again, like, big picture here, I've seen a lot of people being like, well, it's back to where it was. Like, this is a complete setback to where it was before Lance Leipold. No, it's not. No, it is not. They would be getting blown out in these games. These would not be close games. Again, like I put this out on Twitter. I mentioned it in the recap. If you took the high points by ESPN's win probability in all 3 games they lost the last 3 weeks, the chances of them going 0-3 is like 0.17%. Those are spurn losses where you did a few things wrong. And in a lot of other games, sometimes you have close games where you still do some things wrong and you still find a way to survive, because college football is weird. And a lot of times the other team will mess up too. Kansas has been kind of unfortunate because the other team has done the opposite of mess up. They've done everything perfectly, and Kansas has messed up for this stuff to happen, to where like, this isn't just like complete. It's not like this is going to be bad grammar. It's not turnaroundable, like they can turn this around is what I'm saying. Like, they're close, right? It's so different than those points. So can you get that positive momentum to finish back, right? Even if let's say you do lose these next 2 games, you lose to TCU, you lose at Arizona State. If you're sitting at 1-5, can you find a way to finish 5-7? Can you find a way to win your last game of the season? Can you find a way to beat K-State, or win some of these games where you do at least gain some positive momentum, that even if you don't accomplish much from the season of making a bowl or doing this or that you at least have won 2 your last 3 or something like that headed into the offseason, that you can feel like there's a little bit more positivity going into that offseason. Let's finish up here, a little KU roundup. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for small businesses, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post a job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You can get in on the KU TCU action. You can get some props for the game. Certainly, it feels like TCU is giving up a lot of rushing yards, so maybe some good rushing props that you can have there. Also, if you're looking at the TCU side, KU's been giving up some big passing plays, and maybe you can get some stuff with that. You can get some touchdown bets. You can bet on basketball, KU to win the title at 10-1 right now over at FanDuel or whatever else. And their NFL season with the Chiefs, whatever it is, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Tomorrow's episode, planning to talk a little worry scale about the KU football team and the program and everything. We get to our KU TCU preview later this week. We're also set to have a crossover episode for you this week with Locked On Jayhawks as well. Little KU roundup here. KU women's basketball has a new commit. Tatiana Brown. She is a 6'2" forward from the state of Colorado, so adding a little bit of size and height down low. This adds to a class. KU already had a top 50 commit nationally in Libby Fandle, a 6-foot shooting guard. So good stuff on the recruiting trail for Brandon Schneider as they look to continue to pile on classes with, Samaya Nichols kind of leading the way as the future star player for him. Women's volleyball now sitting at 9-1. They're now ranked 7th in the country. They had a huge win over Purdue in 4 sets, which was a previously undefeated team and a top 10 opponent that they beat last week. And then they got a sweep win after that. They did get swept against Creighton. It was a bad Saturday for KU athletics, but I wonder how much of that was, you're riding high after the Purdue win. Maybe you're, not as focused on it. I don't know. Creighton's a really good team though, too. Like they're ranked in the top 10. So not a bad loss. Kansas sitting at 9-1 with a loss to a top 10 team. That's the only loss. And now they start Big 12 play. They got UCF tonight. They got Houston Friday, then hit the road next week. So the road to trying to win the Big 12 starts now. And then women's soccer now sitting with 4 wins, 3 losses, 3 draws. They're 1-2 in Big 12 play. They just got a road win at Cincinnati, which is pretty big because Nate Lee, the soccer coach, previously was the coach at Cincinnati. And I think he was referred to by Travis Goff as like Mr. Cincinnati or something like that. So that was big for him. I'd imagine there's still some recruiting pipelines there. So to get a win there, probably pretty important. And now they play UCF on Thursday, and then they're at Colorado on Sunday. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page, back for plenty more KUTCU content throughout the week with LOJ. So make sure you're subscribed anywhere that you do tune into the show. See you next time.